Rick Collins, a wealthy and powerful businessman, runs Collins Enterprises with a reputation as a decisive and talented leader. Outwardly, Rick is the perfect model of a dapper man, always appearing in perfectly tailored suits with a confident smile on his lips. But behind that facade, his eyes always shimmer with calculation. Meanwhile, Mara Grant is a young, intelligent, and hardworking woman of color, working in the company's market analysis department. Mara not only has to strive to prove her capabilities in a high-pressure environment, but she also faces disdainful looks due to her differences. With a single goal of building her career, Mara ignores the obstacles around her and focuses solely on her work. One day, Rick starts to notice Mara. In a meeting, he praises her analysis in front of the whole team, saying her ideas are excellent. After the meeting, Rick calls Mara into his office. Initially, he converses with professionalism and respect. He shares the challenges he faced when he was young, then looks at Mara with genuine eyes. "You are truly talented, Mara. I want you to know that your efforts have not gone unnoticed. If there's anything I can do to help you advance your career, don't hesitate to tell me." Rick's words surprised Mara. She had never thought that a powerful person like Rick would pay attention to a subordinate like her. From then on, Rick frequently seeks opportunities to engage with Mara. He shows interest in the project she is working on, offers to help her develop her skills, and even shares stories about how he helped other young employees advance in their careers. Initially, Mara is a bit wary, but Rick's patience and kindness gradually make her trust him. In her eyes, he is not just a powerful CEO, but also a dedicated mentor. Every piece of advice from Rick significantly helps Mara progress in her work, and she begins to feel that she has found a strong supporter. However, as Rick begins to spend more time chatting privately with Mara, the atmosphere gradually becomes unpredictable. Although Rick's words and gestures remain professional, his gaze seems to change from kindness to something else, elusive. Mara, feeling slightly uncomfortable, still tries to think positively, telling herself that she might be overthinking. Rick continues to invite her to more significant projects, often praising her in front of colleagues. This makes Mara feel she is on the right track. She even texts her mother, "Today was a wonderful day. My boss genuinely cares about my work and helps me a lot. I think this will be a great opportunity." Mara is unaware that behind the sincerity she perceives, Rick is gradually implementing another plan, a calculated scheme that she could never have imagined. It was late in the evening, the office mostly deserted. The light from the tall buildings outside cast through the large windows, creating a quiet but tense space. Mara Grant was organizing documents, preparing to leave when the phone on her desk rang. "Mara, come to my office for a moment. I'd like to discuss a new project," came the warm voice of Rick Collins. Mara was slightly surprised but responded quickly. She picked up a stack of documents, adjusted her vest, and stepped into the elevator, unaware that this conversation would change her life. As she entered the CEO's office, Rick sat there, behind a large walnut desk. He flashed a friendly smile and gestured for her to sit down. Mara carefully placed the documents on the desk, her eyes filled with expectation. "I've reviewed your report," Rick said, his tone calm. "Honestly, I'm impressed. This next project is very important to the company, and I think you are the best person to lead it." Mara was surprised. She had never thought she would be given such a significant opportunity. "Thank you. I'll give it my all," she replied, her eyes lighting up with joy. Rick stood up, walked around the desk, and came closer. He sat down on a chair next to her, creating an unusually intimate distance. "You know, Mara, you are a special person. Not everyone has your talent and enthusiasm. I truly believe you can go far with the right guidance." Mara felt slightly uneasy but nodded, maintaining her professionalism. "I really appreciate your encouragement. Your trust means a lot to me. However, the conversation gradually shifted. Rick began to talk more about himself, about the challenges he had overcome, and how he had helped other young employees in their careers. His voice became warmer, and his gaze changed. It was no longer just professional, but seemed to carry a more personal concern. Mara, Rick continued, I want to ensure you have everything you need to succeed. If there's anything at all, just let me know. When Rick lightly placed a hand on the back of her chair, Mara clearly felt that the atmosphere had changed. Her smile stiffened. Although Rick hadn't done anything overt, his gesture made her uncomfortable. I really appreciate your offer, she said, trying to end the conversation. If there's nothing else, I'll go and get ready for the project. Rick stood up, stepped back, and smiled. Of course, Mara. But remember, this door is always open to you. Mara bowed her head, gathered her documents, and left. As she stepped out of the office, she couldn't shake the tension that lingered in the air. Something was off, but she couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. Rick stood alone, watching Mara through the large glass. He took a sip of liquor from the glass on his desk, his smile turning into an inscrutable expression, half genuine, half full of calculation. In the following weeks, Rick used the excuse of supporting Mara on the project to continuously call her into private meetings, even arranging meetings outside. Mara was unaware of Rick's underlying schemes, and through many interactions, Rick pushed their relationship to deepen beyond professional boundaries. One day, about 4 months after the project had started, Mara Grant sat motionless on the small bed in her cramped apartment, her hands trembling as she held a pregnancy test with 2 clear, red lines. Fear spread throughout her body, overwhelming all other sensations. Just a few months earlier, her job at Collins Enterprises had been her only hope for advancing her career, but now, everything seemed uncertain. Mara knew she needed to talk to Rick. Regardless of the circumstances, he was the father of the child, and she believed that with his power and position, Rick could help her in this situation. One morning, Mara took a deep breath before stepping into the elevator that led to Rick's office. Anxiety gripped her, but she reassured herself that Rick would understand. After all, he had shown that he cared about his employees and had been sincere with her. The elevator doors opened. Mara stepped into Rick's office, where he sat behind his desk, exuding confidence and authority. Mara, what's wrong? You look worried, Rick said with a faint smile, his eyes slightly curious. Mara sat down in the chair opposite him, her hands clenched together to maintain her composure. She looked up and met his gaze. Rick, I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant, and the baby is yours. Her words fell into a stunned silence. The smile on Rick's lips slowly faded, replaced by a scrutinizing gaze. He leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression turning cold. Are you sure? Rick asked, his voice lacking empathy. Mara nodded, striving to keep her composure. I didn't come here to make things difficult. I just think you need to know the truth, and I hope you can support me in raising this child. Rick gave a derisive laugh, then stood up and walked over to the large window where the morning light cast his stern face in sharp relief. Mora, listen. I don't know what you want from me, but I won't let this affect my work or my reputation. This is not something I will make public. Mara stared at Rick, incredulous. What are you saying? This is your child. You can't just abandon me and the baby like this. Rick turned around, his eyes cold and sharp. Listen clearly, Mara. I won't take responsibility for a mistake. If you're wise, you'll handle this yourself. And if you make a fuss, I'll make sure you never have a chance to work in this industry again. Rick's words were like a punch to Mara's chest. She stood up, her eyes red but filled with resolve. You're a coward, Rick. You will regret doing this. She left the office, feeling as if the world was crumbling beneath her feet. But deep down, She knew she had no time to be weak. She had to be strong for herself and for the baby growing inside her. As Mara tried to find work at other companies, she quickly realized that Rick had followed through on his threat. Doors seemed to close in her face. Despite her efforts to apply at numerous places, all her attempts were rejected without clear reasons. Mara realized that Rick had not only refused to support her, but had also cruelly destroyed any chance for her to continue her career. No matter how difficult the circumstances, Mara did not give up. She started taking odd jobs, saving every penny to prepare for the birth of her child. Whenever she felt tired, she would place her hand on her stomach and remind herself, I will get through this for my child. She couldn't rely on Rick, but she knew she would do everything to ensure her child had a better life. And deep in her heart, Mara swore that one day, Rick Collins would have to face the truth and pay for what he had done. Mara knew that raising Alex alone would not be easy, but from the day he was born, she promised herself she would do everything to ensure her son grew up surrounded by love. Alex had light skin, light brown hair, and sharp eyes, traits of his father that Mara never wanted to mention. When Alex was young, the curious glances and whispers around her were not uncommon. Look at that child. He doesn't look like his mother at all. She must have some secret nobody knows about. Mara didn't respond to the rumors. She simply held Alex's hand, leading him through the busy streets with a serene smile. But no matter how much she tried to hide it, Alex felt the difference. One evening, when he was 7, Alex sat next to Mara in their small kitchen. His eyes were full of questions. Mom, why don't I look like the other kids? Why is my skin a different color from yours and my friends? Mara looked into her son's clear eyes, her heart tightening. She pulled him into her arms, gently stroking his soft hair. Alex, you are special. That's a gift from God. But remember, what makes you valuable isn't your skin color, but your heart. You have a kind heart, and that's what's most important. Alex looked at his mother, his eyes shining with innocence and trust. I promise to be a good person, Mom. Despite life's challenges, Mara always taught Alex about love and kindness. She would tell him about the history of people of color in their community who had overcome injustice to fight for their rights. Alex grew up respecting and valuing these lessons. Life wasn't always smooth. At school, Alex often faced mockery. You're not one of us. Look at your skin. You don't belong here. These words hurt Alex, but he remembered his mother's teachings. One day, when teased, he simply stood tall, looked the bullies in the eyes, and walked away. That night, he told his mother about it. Mara sat beside him, her gaze gentle yet firm. Alex, I know those words made you sad, but remember, you don't need to prove anything to them. Be kind even if they are not to you. Someday, they will realize your true worth. His mother's words became a guiding principle for Alex's life. He grew up to be a kind-hearted young man, always helping others around him, regardless of who they were. He was not only proud of his differences, but also strived to connect with the community of color, people who had become his extended family. Despite the hardships, Mara always looked at Alex with pride. In him, she saw light and hope, a testament to her love and resilience. And in Alex's heart, his mother's teachings echoed. Love and kindness are what connect us, no matter our skin color or background. Alex was always a curious boy. From a young age, he noticed that he was different from his mother. In the old mirror in his room, he often stared at his light brown hair, bright white skin, and round eyes, traits that didn't resemble his mother's warm brown skin and distinctively thick, curly hair. As he grew older, Alex became more aware of these differences. In the small community where he and his mother lived, the children of color often played together, but Alex always stood out, sometimes feeling out of place. One afternoon, while playing soccer with some neighborhood kids, an older boy suddenly stopped, looked at Alex, and asked, "Where's your dad, Alex? Why have I never seen him?" Alex was taken aback. He had never thought much about his father. His mother, Mara, had always been the sole caregiver, and he had never questioned it. But now, that question echoed in his mind throughout the afternoon. That evening, Alex sat in the small living room, watching Mara cook in the cramped kitchen. The yellow light cast on her curly hair created a warm atmosphere. Alex watched her for a long time, then hesitantly approached. "Mom," he began, his voice filled with confusion. "Who is my father?" Mara paused, her shoulders trembling slightly. She put down her spoon and turned around, trying to keep her smile. "Why do you ask that, Alex?" she asked softly. "Today a friend asked about Dad. I didn't know what to say. Why have I never met him?" Alex said, his eyes filled with curiosity. Mara sat down, pulling her chair closer to Alex to look him directly in the eyes. Her gaze was gentle, but carried a deep sadness. "Alex, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You don't need to worry about your father. Even though he's not here, I'm always with you. And I love you more than anything in the world." "But why isn't he here?" Alex continued, his large eyes looking at his mother for answers. Mara sighed, placing her hand on Alex's shoulder. "Sometimes people in our lives can't stay with us for various personal reasons. But that's not important, Alex. What matters is that we have each other, and I will always protect you." Alex was silent for a long while. He looked into his mother's sincere eyes and nodded, though his heart was not fully satisfied. He didn't ask further, but the question about his absent father had deeply embedded itself in his mind, becoming an unresolved mystery. In the following years, Alex occasionally thought about that conversation, wondering if his mother was hiding something. But every time he saw her smile, he reassured himself that having his mother was enough. Yet, deep in his soul, the question about his father remained a part of him, a part that he knew he would eventually have to confront. After years of perseverance and overcoming challenges, Alex finally made his dreams a reality. At the age of 24, he became a talented and promising engineer. Despite coming from a challenging background, Alex had built his career on hard work and determination, qualities that his mother, Mara, had always instilled in him. When he received a job offer from Collins Enterprises, one of the largest corporations in the engineering and construction sector, Alex couldn't believe his luck. It was a significant opportunity for him to prove himself. Unbeknownst to him, the company was owned by Rick Collins, the biological father he had never met. On his first day at Collins Enterprises, Alex entered the towering building with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The shiny hallways and modern spaces, filled with well-dressed employees bustling around, made him realize the magnitude of the company. In his first meeting, Alex quickly impressed when he presented new ideas for a project he had been assigned. With confidence, deep knowledge, and quick problem-solving skills, he drew the attention of his colleagues and superiors. "Who is this guy?" "He's young but very knowledgeable," a team member whispered to another. The more he worked, the more Alex proved himself. He was not only a skilled engineer, but also carried an enthusiasm and a progressive spirit. Team leaders and managers started to take notice, including Rick Collins, who regularly kept tabs on outstanding employees in the company. One day, Rick attended a meeting where Alex presented ideas on optimizing a major project. Standing in front of the senior staff, Alex maintained his composure, his eyes bright with passion for his work. As he concluded, the room fell silent for a few seconds before erupting into loud applause. Rick, sitting at the head of the table, looked at Alex with a sharp yet pleased expression. "What's your name?" Rick asked, his voice deep and authoritative. "Alex Grant, sir," he replied, bowing respectfully. Rick nodded, his gaze inscrutable as it swept over him. I like your way of thinking, Alex. I hope to see many more ideas like this from you in the future. Alex felt as though he had reached a significant milestone. Yet, he was unaware that, across the table, Rick was looking at him with a strange sense of familiarity, a vague connection he could not immediately explain. As time passed, Alex's talent and dedication continuously made him stand out at Collins Enterprises. His colleagues admired him for his creativity and inspirational approach to projects. The leadership, especially Rick Collins, increasingly noticed this young engineer. Rick couldn't deny that there was something about Alex that drew him in, a familiarity he couldn't name. Alex was not only intelligent and perceptive, but also had natural leadership qualities. Rick, always keen on recognizing outstanding talents, started spending more time talking and working with Alex. One ordinary morning, Rick Collins was preparing for an important presentation in the company's large auditorium. While connecting his laptop to the projector, a technical staff member was quickly checking the presentation files to ensure everything was running smoothly. As Rick stood nearby reviewing, a photo unexpectedly popped up on the screen for a brief moment. It was a picture of Alex smiling, his arm around a woman, Mara Grant. Time seemed to stop for Rick. He stared at the screen, immediately recognizing the familiar face of the woman he had abandoned nearly 25 years ago. Mara hadn't changed much. Her eyes were still sharp and strong as ever. Rick quickly turned to the technician. Rewind that file. The technician, flustered, quickly scrolled back to the image in Alex's personal presentation slide. As the photo appeared again, Rick stared intently, trying to maintain his composure. But inside, his mind was in turmoil. All right, continue checking the other files, Rick commanded, his voice striving to remain calm. The technician, unaware of anything unusual, quickly left. Rick, standing alone in the empty room, kept his eyes fixed on the image on the screen. Memories of the past flooded back. He remembered Mara, the woman he had abandoned after learning she was pregnant. He remembered the coldness in his words, the selfishness in his decisions then. And now, the image of Alex, a young man with eyes full of determination and skin just like his, made it impossible for Rick to deny the truth. Alex was his biological son. From that day on, Rick began to observe Alex more discreetly. He noticed everything, how Alex worked, how he communicated with colleagues, and even his minor habits. Rick saw in Alex not only talent, but a strange similarity to himself. The confidence, the spirit of advancement, and occasionally, gestures that mirrored his own. There was no longer any doubt in Rick's mind that Alex was his son. But instead of confronting the truth immediately, Rick chose to remain silent. He needed time to think. One day, as Alex entered Rick's office to report on a new project, Rick's gaze was fixed on him. Did you do this work alone? Rick asked, his voice deep and suggestive. Yes, sir. I believe this approach could optimize the process, Alex replied confidently. Rick gave a faint smile. This young man was not only smart, but had a strength of will that was almost unbelievable, just like him at that age. After Alex left, Rick sat silently in his office. Part of him wanted to reveal the truth, to confess everything to Alex and even Mara. Yet another part hesitated. His reputation, power, and everything he possessed could be threatened if this truth were disclosed. Alex vividly remembers that fateful moment. A small picture fell from a stack of documents in Rick's office. It was an old photo, yellowed with age. Alex couldn't take his eyes off the woman in the picture, his mother, Mara. Beside her stood a young, handsome man with a confident gaze. It was none other than Rick Collins. Alex's heart raced. Questions swirled in his mind. Why was his mother in this picture? And why was it in Rick's office? He tried to find a reasonable explanation, but everything seemed too vague. Unable to sit still, Alex grabbed the photo and went straight to Rick's office the next morning, feeling a heavy weight in his heart. Confronting Rick, Alex placed the photo on the table and demanded an explanation. Rick initially tried to remain calm, but his surprise was evident as he glanced at the photo. He turned away, attempting to hide his emotions. After a moment of silence, Rick admitted he had a relationship with Mara years ago, but his tone was cold and disinterested. Alex felt his blood boil. He was shocked that this powerful man had known his mother, and even more stunned by the cold ending to their story. Rick's words fueled Alex's anger to its peak. Leaving Rick's office, Alex drove home with a mix of anger, disappointment, and betrayal. Arriving home, he entered with the photo still clenched in his hand. Mara, sitting by the kitchen table, noticed her son's grim face. Alex presented the photo to his mother without saying a word. Mara looked at the picture, her face turning pale. Although she had mentally prepared for this day, the revelation still shook her. Finally, Mara was forced to recount the whole story. Years ago, while working at Collins Enterprises, Rick Collins had used his power to approach her. Their relationship ended when Mara became pregnant with Alex, and Rick refused to take responsibility. He not only abandoned her, but also sabotaged her career. Hearing his mother's story, Alex felt as if his world was crumbling. Everything he had believed in was now torn apart. He was not only angry at Rick, but also at his mother for hiding the truth all these years. Without another word, Alex walked out, leaving Mara sitting there, her face wet with tears. That night, Alex sat alone in the darkness, staring at the photo, his anger still seething. He also felt a deep pain, the pain of knowing that his entire life was part of a long-buried secret. Alex resented Rick for abandoning his mother and forcing him to live under societal prejudice and discrimination for 24 years. He could not forgive this and decided to expose the truth, seeking justice for his mother. Alex entered the large boardroom, armed with undeniable evidence. He presented before the board of directors, revealing how Rick Collins had exploited his power to oppress his mother, Mara Grant, and then abandoned his responsibilities. Alex publicly disclosed the relationship between himself, his mother, and Rick, leaving the entire board in shock. The evidence included the old photo, testimony from his mother's former colleagues, and HR documents that exposed Rick's past misconduct. The board had no choice but to demand Rick's immediate resignation to preserve the company's reputation. Rick, stripped of his power and reputation, had no face to reclaim Mara and Alex after his actions. He quietly left the building in defeat. Alex felt no triumph, but he knew he had done what was necessary, bringing the truth to light and reclaiming justice for his mother. Despite Rick losing everything, Alex could not feel relief. A greater pain still simmered within him, the sense of betrayal by both his father and mother. He wondered why Mara had hidden the truth all these years, forcing him to live a story that was never whole. When he returned home, Alex confronted Mara. His eyes were full of hurt. Mara looked at her son, knowing that no words could fully soothe his pain, but she tried to explain. "I didn't want you to carry the burden of the past," Mara said, her voice trembling. "I thought if you didn't know, you could have a more peaceful life." Alex was silent, the anger in him no longer flaming, but still smoldering. He understood that his mother had tried to protect him, but hiding the truth had created a vast void in his life. Alex said nothing more, only nodded slightly, and then walked to his room, leaving Mara sitting there, her face full of regret. In Alex's heart, the pain was not easily assuaged, but he knew he needed time to understand and forgive both Rick and Mara. Rick's once grand office now felt like an empty void. The glass walls still reflected the city lights from outside, but they no longer conveyed a sense of authority. Rick sat alone on his familiar chair, his gaze deeply set on the bustling scene below. His phone lay on the desk, the screen lighting up with Alex's name on the contact list. He hesitated for a long moment before pressing call. The phone rang several times, but no one answered. Finally, the call was rejected. Rick stared at the dim screen, feeling a profound sense of emptiness. He realized that not only had he lost his power and reputation, but he had also lost any connection with the son he never truly knew. He leaned back, his eyes lifeless, feeling the depth of the isolation he had created for himself. Alex decided to leave Collins Enterprises and start a non-profit organization to support the underprivileged in the Black community. The final image is of Alex and Mara renovating an old house together, their eyes looking towards a future filled with hope, but also some apprehension. Sitting alone in his empty office, Rick profoundly felt the irony of fate. He had always believed that power and status could control everything. He had looked down on those he deemed lesser than himself, especially Mara Grant, the Black woman he had exploited and abandoned. To Rick, she was just a part of his past that he could easily forget. But now, the sun he had never acknowledged had risen to expose the truth, forcing him to confront the consequences of his arrogance and selfishness. Alex, his own flesh and blood, had turned his back on him because of the sins Rick had tried to deny. Rick realized that his disdain and abuse of power had not only hurt others but had also destroyed himself. He had allowed his arrogance to cloud the value of humanity, failing to see that kindness and respect are the most enduring qualities.